Someone who doesn't believe in angels at all, author Richard Dawkins makes his return to our program. If you don't know who Richard Dawkins is, he's the most famous atheist in the world, and that he's inspired a lot of people. He's angered some. I do love the title he has, the Pope of Atheism. I'd put that on a card if I were the Pope of Atheism. He's been on the show before. He had written a book called The God Delusion, and we've all had the conversation about God or the Supreme Being or whatever it is that you want to believe in. You perhaps right now battle with it, the idea of a higher power. Is that what's responsible for creating the world? And whenever that conversation comes up, the argument against any sort of religious, I guess, faith-based system for the beginning of the world is evolution. And that's what we're going to talk about. Did you know this year, I guess what month of November, it'll be 150 years since Darwin's On the Origin of Species was published, which was, the theory of evolution. And to this day, one of the most important non-religious documents ever. And to a lot of people, they still haven't settled the debate, evolution or a higher power. Richard Dawkins says he settled it. He's got this new book called The Greatest Show on Earth, and he says that evolution is not a theory, but it is a fact, a proper fact. Mr. Dawkins returns. Here's his bio.
Hey, do you believe in God? If you do, get ready to squirm. Or maybe scream, because your biggest nightmare is right here. Richard Dawkins, king of the atheists. The guy they call Darwin's Rottweiler.
It is irrational to allow your life to be governed by something other than evidence. Darwinism does provide the answer to these profound questions.
Spoken like a true scientist, which makes sense, because that's what Dawkins is. But do you know how he became one? Well, believe it or not, this guy at one point did believe in God. He was brought up Anglican, but stopped believing in his mid-teens. Why, you ask? Well, he discovered Charles Darwin and evolution. Dawkins ended up studying zoology at Oxford and got his PhD. 10 years later, he made a bit of a splash. If you were around in 1976, maybe you remember the selfish gene. That was Dawkins' take on Darwin's theory of natural selection. Don't know it? Well, how about this one? The God delusion. That's the one where Dawkins says that God almost certainly does not exist, and that people who believe blindly in a supreme being are, well, delusional.
I think it's pathetic. And I think it's something that we ought to have grown out of.
Pretty harsh stuff. So harsh, in fact, that Dawkins' friends and literary agent wouldn't let him write it for 6 years, until atheism had become more mainstream. Now, Dawkins is at it again with a new book called The Greatest Show on Earth.
We can't see evolution happening because we don't live long enough. We look at the clues that remain, and they all overwhelmingly point to the same conclusion. Evolution is a fact.
Please welcome back Richard Dawkins. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
That is a lovely tie.
That's my Galapagos tie, one of my ties hand-painted by my wife. This is a one-off, unique tie.
Did you come home one day and she had doodled on your tie, or was that always part of the plan?
This was a present, and she spent hours and hours slaving over this. It's not a doodle.
Not at all. No. Well, the Galapagos Island, I mean, that is significant for Charles Darwin.
It was one of the formative places that he visited. He didn't get the idea straight away from that. It came afterwards. He collected specimens from Galapagos, and then later, when he got back to England and the specimens were identified and classified in London in the museums, he then got the idea there's something funny going on here. These animals are all kind of like South American animals, but not exactly. And so he worked out that what had happened was that some kind of freak events had blown animals across or drifted across. They'd got to the islands, very unusual thing to happen, and then they started evolving when they got there. And then a slightly less freakish event would drive them across to other islands within the archipelago. So within the archipelago, they're kind of much more similar than they are to the ones on the mainland. Everything, as it just said on the film clip, everything is exactly as you would expect if they'd evolved.
With the conversation has, in the last, 15 years, there was a time when people talked about the secularization of society, and then all of a sudden it seemed like society became more and more religious across the world. Did you feel that, and is that why because I wondered for you at what point this became from being academics to being, in a sense, a cause? Because this is more than just that for you.
I don't know if it's right that the world has become more religious. Maybe we've noticed it more. I think in the United States it's become politicized, and there's a kind of divide between two cultures in the United States, and that's become very aggressive politically, and you saw it in the campaigns of George Bush and then the truly ludicrous campaign of Sarah Palin more more recently. So I think that in the United States there probably has been a kind of cultural, political move towards skepticism of this kind of science. But if you look at the polls, it hasn't changed over the last 15 years. More than 40% of the United States population has believed that the world is only less than 10,000 years old, which is ridiculous.
There are a lot of, but those are the people who have the microphones, it appears. Some of those people.
Yeah.
Well, you've actually taken on some of the language of the Bill O'Reilly types by referring to people who deny evolution as history deniers, which I chuckled at when I read that.
I didn't think that was Bill O'Reilly language. I mean, it's simply the literal truth. I mean, history deniers, they are denying history, just like Holocaust deniers are denying history.
Yeah, you said that in the book, and I mean, obviously it's provocative language, and...
Not to me it wasn't. It only occurred to me it was provocative after the book was published and people picked up on it. Yeah. And
so you just look at it like there's enough evidence to support, as much evidence to support evolution as there was something like the Holocaust.
Exactly. There's at least as much evidence to support evolution as to support the Holocaust.
I had a guy that I know said, if you want proof that no higher power created humans, he said, look at the human shoulder. It's so poorly designed that there's just no way that a higher being would be that dumb as to get the shoulder wrong.
I'm in pain in my right shoulder at the moment, and yeah.
The thing about it is that, can this book exist beside religious texts? Does it have to exist on top of religious texts? Because if you're right, and you have that science in your mind to prove this, then who cares what people believe?
Well, I care a lot because I think it's such an exciting thing. I mean, I think that the fact that we exist because of natural selection, the fact that we are cousins of every living creature in the world, the fact that our history goes back nearly 4 billion years, that's an astounding, enthralling, inspiring fact, and I care whether people get that.
So in a sense, by denying evolution is missing the point of how beautiful the universe can be.
Precisely. To deny that would be like never listening to music, never seeing any art, never seeing a beautiful sunset. It's part of the beauty of existence.
When did that song ring true to you? When did you have a moment you went, that sings to me?
I guess about 16.
But because I read Jim Morrison. I read the Jim Morrison book. What did you read at 16 that got you there?
No, I think it was talking to my father, really, who told me about it. And a rather inspiring biology teacher as well.
You sort of said, this is how beautiful evolution can be.
No, they didn't use quite that language. No, I mean, I could have came to that later.
As you take this book and these stories across Europe now, are you received differently after the God Delusion?
Yes, I mean, I think that there are people who assume that this must be another atheistic book. It's an anti-creationist book, it's a pro-evolution.